This is a Z-Man Chatterbait, one of the most popular bass lures of all time. And this is a better chatterbait for when the bite is tough, which I made myself. Can a garage-made bait really beat a $9 Z-Man Chatterbait? Let's find out. So here's the deal. Chatterbaits are basically vibrating jigs that trigger bass' predatory instincts and drive them absolutely nuts. But they weren't always a big deal. Back in 2006, this guy named Brian Thrift started crushing bass tournaments, like hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. And his secret weapon? An obscure new bait called the Chatterbait. Since then, chatterbaits have gone from, what's that thing, to every tackle box has one. They catch fish and win tournaments year-round, which is exactly why, being the mad scientist bait maker that I am, I decided to build my own. Now, Z-Man has this patent that locks down their blade to hook connection and this blade shape, which means I couldn't just copy-paste their design. So I had to engineer mine differently, and that meant attaching the blade to the flat eye hook with a split ring. But with a little lead pouring here, a little powder painting and blade assembly there, some time at the vise, and voila! We have a totally custom handmade chatterbait. And now the real fun begins. Because to test if my homemade chatterbait can actually hang with the Z-Man chatterbait, we're using something I call the Chatterbait scorecard. 4 categories that decide whether a bait is legendary or just another piece of tackle sitting in the garage. 4 categories, one at a time, head to head, let's do it. First up, color. Because if it doesn't get a bass's attention or look like food, you're not even in the game. Looking at the Z-Man Chatterbait, Z-Man's got pros and research teams picking these patterns, and this chartreuse white color is a reflection of that. This is a bold, classic color. Pretty dialed. Now looking at mine, as you can see here, I picked colors based on the bluegill that actually swim in my local ponds. Another classic color. The verdict? Both look super tasty. It's a draw. Next, action. This is the bait's personality. Does it move in a way that flips the predator switch in a bass's brain? Looking at the Z-Man Chatterbait, this bait has a very tight vibration with lots of chatter. A proven recipe for success. Looking at mine, because I had to use a split ring blade connection, the vibration is wider and the action is actually more erratic. Not the same action as the Z-Man bait, but some anglers actually say they prefer this design better. Verdict? Both are very similar, but since the Z-Man bait's action has such a great track record, I think it actually has a slight edge here. Third, quality. This is all about whether your bait survives fish after fish after fish, or if it's a one-hit wonder. Looking at the Z-Man Chatterbait, it's factory built, but very well done. We have a wire-tied skirt, solid blade components, and a quality heavy-duty hook. Tournament ready, right out of the box. Now let's look at mine. Every skirt I put on a chatterbait is hand-tied, every quality component chosen by me, from the owner split ring to the VMC hook, and built so I could trust it on the water. The verdict? Both are built like absolute tanks. Another tie. And finally, design. This is the big picture. What the bait is meant to do and how well it actually does it. The Z-Man bait is sold as a finesse chatterbait. It's compact, downsized. But here's the weird part. This hook is not actually sized for finesse fishing. With finesse fishing, you typically want 8 to 12 pound line. But with this hook, you will need to use at least 17 pound line. Not ideal for days when the bite is tough. But let's look at mine. Here we see the same compact, downsized profile, but I swapped in a thinner, high-quality hook meant for 8 to 12 pound line. Say hello to hook sets and goodbye to lost fish. Verdict? This round, not even close. My homemade bait wins on design, hands down. So after running the scorecard, here's the takeaway. Z-Man's Chatterbait is still an absolute beast of a bait. But my homemade version? It actually holds its own. In fact, in the design category, it straight up wins. And that's kind of the bigger point here. Fishing lures aren't magic. They're just a mix of color, action, quality, and design. Understand those 4 and you can build or tweak a bait to fit your style, your waters, and your fish. And honestly, that's what makes this so fun. You don't need $1 million factory to make something that works. Sometimes a split ring, a little imagination, and some mad scientist vibes in the garage is enough to compete with the big dogs. Now, if you want to try this experiment for yourself, I dropped links in the description. One for the Zman Chatterbait if you just want to grab it and fish, and another for all the components I use to build mine if you're feeling bold enough to make your own. If you like this breakdown, I've got plenty more lure building experiments coming your way. So hit subscribe if you want to see me keep pushing the line between homemade and pro-grade tackle. And remember, the best lure isn't always the one off the shelf. Sometimes it's the one you build yourself.